The following podcast is brought to you by CDKOffers.com. Use offer code DIESHRINK for 3% off everything on the website and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows codes. All right, on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and I am joined today, as I am every fortnight, mostly, by my co-host,
Dan. And, you know, I don't know, whenever someone says Fortnite, I want to think of a stupid joke about that goddamn game, but...
that will appear in every single game's press announcement.
For the next 30 years, I don't know. But I don't have a good one this week, but... Fortnite, the game has ruined the word Fortnite for me, Tom.
An interesting way to start this episode, Dan.
Just attacking Fortnite.
You know what? We're just going to lay into it, guys. You know what? Cancel the rest of the stories. No, actually, I have no problems with Fortnite, Dan.
No, Fortnite's fine.
I just don't even really know what it is anymore, if we're being honest. Like, I'm not even sure. It became something it never intended to be with that one game mode. And then now I guess it's just a concert app. I'm not really sure what's happening anymore.
A concert app where John Wick and Thanos shoot each other every once in a while.
Yeah, where Master Chief and Kratos and John Wick and a cowboy stack of pancakes with syrup, I believe is one of them.
Yeah, that's
all fight each other. Almost like a combination of the biggest Xbox and PlayStation icons and rejected Pokemon ideas. All hold AKs and shoot each other.
Mixed in with a fever dream.
Yeah. But that is not what this show is supposed to be about. Earlier today, I posted actually to the Moore's Law's Dead Twitter, me giving Reesie what I called a turbo belly rub, where I put my feet back and forth rubbing her, and she was just like, immediately fell asleep when I started doing that. So for those who didn't see it, she was on her back below my desk, and I used both of my feet in kind of like a stair stepper motion and just double rubbed her belly. She didn't even know what to make of it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she deserves it, Tom.
Well, she deserves it. She had actually a pretty rough weekend. I did post that too. I mean, you know about it. Like, you know, I was busy for a few days, then we talked, you know, because we usually game at least once every other day or something together. And I was just like, so yeah, Reesie was just at the emergency room. So that was fun that I had to deal with.
At least it was just a bacterial infection. She's getting over it.
I mean, she's going to be fine. Although I will say, those emergency vet bills are not small, Dan.
No, they're not.
I think this dog's definitely worth it, though. But just a reminder that we can use your support on the Patreon.
And she is the unofficial mascot of the channel. So
that's true. So you could almost you could argue. I think that's what I'm going to title the opening banter: Are vet bills business expenses for Moore's Law's Dead?
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
But what I will say is if you do support us on Patreon, a lot of people loved the graphics artist interview that was for the last guest episode of Broken Silicon from Massive Damage Games. I think that's turning into a slow burner. It was more of a slow burn in terms of listens and downloads, but it's turning into, I mean, it was one of those ones where there were just dozens upon dozens of comments of people saying it was their favorite episode. I mean, if you enjoyed that one, the next guest is actually someone working on God of War Ragnarok right now, because my goal is to just get as many game devs as possible, whether they write for the game, design the gameplay. Like I was looking at people I could try to get on from Guerrilla Games, and there's someone who's like the master of quests. I'm like,
I love that job title.
I would love to have that person on. Been trying to get one of the architects of the Series X on. Of course, I already got someone on who was familiar with its design as well. But yeah, anyone involved in making either the hardware or the games on the hardware is kind of what I'm driving for my guests this summer. And usually they lead to more and more of the same type of guests. Like the server engineer definitely led to more server engineers and more professional side people. Like Mike Bruzzoni led to more of like the Daniel Nenny, Dave Eggleston, and those types of people as well. So, and if anyone is I guess I'm also saying both support us if you want to ask questions of that game dev on Patreon, and look out for that episode on the coming week. But additionally, if you are a game dev, please reach out to the Moore's Law is Dead email. And let's get into some of the opening reader mails. Trogaholic writes in and he asks, "Hi, Tom and Dan. I really like dogs." Well, of course, you should. And he continues, "And as both of you have dogs, I'm wondering how many dog bloopers get cut out of Broken Silicon episodes, and if we will ever be treated to a dog bloopers episode. Thank you for all the hard work." I actually don't think there are a lot of dog things cut out.
Reesie and Wendy are kind of especially Wendy, are two of the quietest dogs we've ever had.
And Wendy's your dog. They don't see her very much, but they have seen her before.
Like, she used to lay behind me in my old apartment when we were recording, and I would have to take her collar off because every once in a while she'll just itch her head for like 45 seconds.
Yeah, just nonstop.
So I would take her collar off if she itched her head, it wouldn't make a bunch of noise. But like, she doesn't bark at all. Like, I don't think I've heard her bark aside from playing with another dog in like probably 6 months.
And I was just going to say, like, the only things that, because like when I first started Moore's Law is Dead, Reesie would just be walking around in the background sometimes. And I don't think she was in the first video. Maybe she was, I don't know. But not in the first one. I don't think that one's on the site anymore. It's such terrible quality. Honestly, when I rewatched my first video, and I'm not even talking about the one I never posted, the MX150 one that I've only shown clips for. I mean, like the one after that about Vega. Like, I pulled that because I literally had no idea what I was talking about when I re-listened to it. I was like, I can't understand. But then if you read the comments, you'll see people go, yeah, this guy made a lot of good points. And like, clearly some people understood what I was saying. I was like, well, good for you. I couldn't. But she wasn't in that episode. But some episodes or videos after that, she showed up. And when I noticed it while editing, I was like, oh, well, like, who cares if she's walking around in the background? The only things we've really cut are like, when their collars are making annoying noises, which they don't really do anymore.
No. Wendy just basically chills and stares out windows all day silently. So.
Yeah, so I don't think there would really be enough content for a blooper reel, but thank you for writing in. Melodic Warrior also writes in, and he says, Tom, when you mentioned the insanity of GDR6X in your review of the 3080 Ti, and then again in episode 108 of Broken Silicon, this gave me an idea. A friend of mine has agreed to helping me purchase and mod both a 3070 Ti and a 3090. We are going to replace the GDR6X on those so that the 3070 Ti will have 12 gigabytes of GDR6, I assume you mean 16, and the 3090 will have 24 gigabytes of normal GDR6. To be fair, this project will take a while to complete, but we would share the results once we were done. Yeah, I guess, because I know that there has been successfully modded a 3070 Ti with not Ti, a 3070 standard with 16 gigabytes of normal GDR6. I don't know if anything would happen. Obviously they can use both, but I don't know like if there's anything at the BIOS that would have a problem if you tried to mod non-6X onto a 3070 Ti. I don't know. I know it would work if you. Right, I'm trying to think, right. I bet you could modify a 3080 Ti to 24 gigabytes or a 3090 possibly to 12, but I do wonder if going from 6X to 6 would work. I mean, maybe it will. I have no clue, but...
we don't mod graphics cards. I'm going to assume, I don't know Melodic Warrior, but I'm going to assume he's done something with this before if he's just deciding to... How much will that end up costing? Yeah, or his friend. How much will that end up costing, though? Like $2,500 probably?
I mean, so you have to buy the graphics card, but then after that, you would need to get the memory chips. And those are actually very cheap, but they're usually sold in bulk. Assuming you can get... honestly, if you have the equipment ahead of time, the cost is mostly going to be the graphics card and like $50 a RAM. Like, it's not going to be that much, actually. Some of these cards with high memory capacities put the chips on the other side of the PCB. So I'd be curious, like, if there'd be any, maybe, although it'd probably just be a dual capacity one for 16 gigabytes. So I don't know, it might work. I'm also just kind of wondering if you'd have to worry, like, what kind of cooler would fit it. Although, again, I don't think that'd be an issue, but I do know, for example, for example, that I know just using one I know for sure off the top of my head is correct. Like the PS4 had a clamshell design where the memory chips were on both sides of the motherboard so that they could have double the capacity. I know some Ampere cards do that.
There would be there's some way to do a custom cooling solution if the stock cooler wouldn't work anymore, but there's a lot to consider.
I definitely had to bring this up, though, because if it does work, I mean, I would just straight up pay some money if you could modify my 3070 into a 16 gigabit per second, or gasp, 18 gigabit per second model for me. I'd pay for it, and if you or I'd pay for a 3070 Ti, because that's really what I want when I'm looking at A4000. A4000 is basically a 16 gigabyte 3070 Ti, but it's got a very low TDP limit. So it's I don't know. I wish there was a service where I could just upgrade Ampere cards to the amount of memory I would argue they just should have had from the start.
Yeah, I don't see a service like that ever happening because that sounds super niche, though.
All right, let us get into corrections and omissions, which we didn't have too many in the past few episodes, but this one, there's quite a healthy helping of them. Actually, the first one I wanted to add is one from myself, which is an update on Ponte Vecchio. I was talking to an Intel contact, and he wanted to clarify that my leak about Ponte Vecchio isn't strictly wrong, but that the FP16 to 32 to 64 ratio I talk about there isn't true for all applications, that most of them it is, to my understanding. And again, this is honestly, I self-admit it's getting a bit above my head at this point, but that it is for many applications, double precision is half the teraflops of single, which then that's double half precision, but that they have one type of data where they've managed to make it, and I'm probably butchering this explanation, but that for one type of workload, they've managed to make it so they don't cut the teraflops in half when they move to double precision. And I've seen some people say that would be really inefficient for their design, to which this person says, no, this was a fundamental architectural achievement that we can do this with one or two types of workloads. This is a secret sauce thing we're doing here, where we did things to allow this. For most things, it's still going to be the same ratio between half, single, and double precision, but that for specific ones, physical simulation, specifically to my understanding, though, again, this is definitely getting above what I would normally cover in terms of technicality, that it can do double precision at a far higher teraflop rating than otherwise it would be able to, going from single precision. So just wanted to clarify that, though. A correction of myself here. I'm guessing you didn't have anything to add to that one, Dan. AC666 writes in, "Hi, Tom and Dan. I don't know if you were being serious or not, but I guess you can go ahead and flog me for being an idiot. The cell processor was never 28 nanometer. It got left on 45 nanometer, but the RSX GPU had a final revision at 28. The article that I linked to you did highlight rumors of a 22 nanometer cell, but that never actually came out. So please flog me for this mistake." Yeah, I mean, I definitely deserve some blame for not double checking that. And this comes from when I was talking about, with a previous guest, I believe, the die shrinking of the PS3 cell, and why eventually they for sure Sony has a PlayStation 3 emulator somewhere that they're working on, because they can't just use 45 nanometer cell chips for PS Now forever. That's absurd. In fact, I would go as far as to say I'm 99% sure they have an emulator working now. They either just aren't sure if they want to use it because they might want to just re-release everything, which is, I won't get into my opinions on that, or they don't think it's quite ready. My guess would be a bit of both, actually, is what's going on. And they're not quite sure what they want to do. But they never got to 28 nanometer, and I should have double-checked your correction of me. So now I'm correcting your correction of my correction.
Yeah.
Tick Tickler writes in, and he says, "Tom, I'm going to be that guy and challenge you on the exemption you give to Rockstar because of their track record. I don't give them an exemption to anything." But I'll continue reading here. "Especially with the upcoming re-release of GTA 5 and Dan Houser's recent departure in order to form his own game studio." I'm not going to read that. I don't know what he's talking about. "I was there to see Bungie's Silver Ball game before term Halo Killer meant Halo itself. It was there when people forgot Fallout 4 at Bethesda writers. I was there when CDP are like, geez, man, I can't even from. Anyways, my point is no pre-order gods, no pre-order masters. And I think he's referencing, I think the episode with Colin Moriarty, where I talk about where we both agree that nobody should be pre-ordering any games. It makes no sense. You are basically you are rewarding. Imagine if you pre-ordered. You're rewarding them for not giving you anything. Like, you're basically paying them and they haven't even proven they've done their job. And that this is actually damaging to the quality of games. That's what me and Colin talk about. We both think that. But I did say that, there are people like Kojima or Rockstar that have an insane track record over the last 2 decades. And so if the game looks like something I know I'll like, then I'll pre-order it. But, that's not an exemption. That's something they've earned. And not all of their games in the past were 10 out of 10s, or even, if you want to get pedantic, above 9 out of 10s. I'd call them all since, I don't know, almost every game they made in the past 2 decades, 10 out of 10s for me personally. But, I also think this kind of goes into you know what, man, then you don't do it. And I don't think you're wrong. But there are a couple studios that, to me, still have legendary status. There's just very, very little of them.
I would say I do agree that I'm a little bit more apprehensive, we'll see, with the Dan Houser not being part of Rockstar anymore. That is a pretty big departure. So we'll see. I bet GTA 6, whenever that actually gets some type of official confirmation, will be good. But
it's coming. It's just probably not coming for 3 or more years.
But I'm going to be a little less immediately on board because Dan Houser isn't writing it.
Well, also, it's I look for if there's red flags, right?
Yeah.
For me, I'm sorry if someone wants to defend them, but there was there was a UN meeting of flags when it comes to red flags for Cyberpunk. They showed 3 gameplay sections, the same 3, the same bar scene, the same car chase scene, the same chick with pink hair talking to your face. They showed the same 3 shots for a year and then didn't let reviewers show footage from the reviews. If something like that happens from Rockstar, I'm not pre-ordering it.
Well, and that was more near the end, the review stuff. But yeah, seeing the reviews not show any real footage from playing the game, that was when you and I both said, oh, this is going to be really bad, isn't it? And yeah, for the entire year preceding its release, I was confused about what all the hubbub was about. It looked like I
thought there were red flags not near the end. There's red flags the entire developmental period from my point of view. But what I would say to Tick Dickler is, as a black and white statement, I will go, don't do any pre-orders. But I'm allowed to make my own rules, all right? And you make your own. But if it's one or the other, I say, don't pre-order.
And I think literally the only reason, the last game that I pre-ordered more than, I don't know, a week before I got it, because at a week out, it's I know I'm going to get this, might as well pre-order it so I can preload it onto my system, was Red Dead Redemption 2. And the only reason I pre-ordered that early was because there was a deal to get it for $40 if you pre-ordered it.
Oh,
and I knew I was going to get Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah. So it's not always, there are times where, and again, it's on a per person, your own thoughts, your own thoughts about a company and your own deals you can get by pre-ordering basis. But it's not an exemption to them. You said, Dan, there are reasons we will be a little more skeptical of the next game, because that guy left the studio. And I don't know. They are just re-releasing GTA 5 over and over. But who can blame them? They're making so much money.
Yeah, it's behind either Tetris or Wii Sports. I can't remember which one.
Yeah, well, I think it is number one besides Minecraft at this point.
Oh, it might be Minecraft, yeah.
QH Freddy writes him, in BS 108, you talk about the limited processor platform support on Windows 11 and mention power-saving features as a possible reason for them limiting previous architectures like Skylake and Kaby Lake. I believe the real reason they're doing this is because of security features mostly having a hardware root of trust. But yeah, the general gist is it's very arbitrary. They should just disable those features that require TPM if the platform doesn't support it. Yeah, that I don't really have much to add to what QH Freddy just said, except that, yes, that is probably part of it as well. Or like if there is a real reason outside of them just, I don't know, some somewhat arbitrary reason. But I think security would be actually a very real reason for them to limit Skylake. I just don't know why that would also then apply to Zen.
Yeah.
Zen 1 and not Zen Plus. To me, that kind of screams that conspiracy theory that they maybe cut off Zen 1 support to not make Intel sad.
That's the only thing I can think of, unless, somebody says, no, there actually is this thing to point to.
Carmen Cry writes in, NVIDIA workstation cards were Quadro. Tesla was the data center brand. But with Ampere, these are all discontinued and replaced with plain A XXXX as the Quadro replacement branding and A XXX/AXX as Tesla replacements. And I actually looked into it, and yeah, he's right. Like if you go to NVIDIA's driver download page, it says NVIDIA RTX/Quadro. And then if you go to the A6, like there is no Quadro connected to these anymore, which I wasn't really aware of, honestly. I knew they got rid of Tesla. That was like a big announcement because they don't want to share their brand with Elon Musk, but
yeah.
QH Freddy writes in, again, since you brought it up in loose ends, let me just say Bergamo is pronounced with the emphasis on the E. Yeah, Bergamo. I mean, there you go. I think I've been saying it right most of the time. Although I will say, guys, and some of you European listeners just need to get this, though. If you go to the pronunciation, like official like dictionaries will pronounce it the way I do half the time, because you have to understand. And this is, guys, listen, English is a different language than your language.
The rule generally is what? The emphasis is on the second to last syllable in most words in English. So that's what you default to.
Which there is official, like grammatically, actually, you do say it in a different way in America. And I am not technically saying it wrong. It's just I often say the European pronunciation half the time as well. But like with Ampere, I don't. I put my foot down on that one, specifically for two reasons. One, Jensen Wang says it that way. And number two, it's actually not, you could argue it's like the unit and not the well, I guess it is the person though, right? But like that, there are actually multiple ways to pronounce that based on the country and whether you're talking about the unit, the person, there's a lot there, guys. So you guys got to double check what you're talking about, though, with pronunciations, too. There was another one that really annoyed me, too, that I forgot what it was, that people kept saying was wrong, that just wasn't wrong. Okay, so let me move on then to story number 1. All right, Zen 4 Raphael is currently 16 cores, but it might still beat Raptor Lake at just about everything. So I have a write-up here. About 2 months ago, Moore's Law said put out an early report on Zen 4 Raphael that detailed everything from minimum IPC to TDP to platform I/O, and also the expected core counts. In short, it was stated that while numerous sources detailed the consideration of a 24-core design, and even PCIe 5.0 at one point, that the consensus was that at least the initial Raphael lineup would top out at 16 cores. And now, as shared on Twitter, Moore's Law said can confirm with even higher confidence than before that as of now, Raphael is just 16 core designs. And this is also, is just 16 core for the top model. And that this is also backed up by friend of the show, Executable Fix, as well as respected Twitter leaker Patrick Schur. Additionally, according to recent talks, we can also communicate that AMD currently projects single-threaded leadership over Raptor Lake next year with Raphael, and supposedly expect a slight win in multi-threading as well, even though Raptor Lake will have 24 cores, although 16 of those are little cores. And also that AM5 is built for substantially higher power CPUs than AM4 initially was. And it's not crazy to think that while Raphael is, and in quotes, limited to just 16 cores, still a lot of cores, some higher core count parts could be coming. These, of course, could be Zen 5 chips or some sort of Bergamo-like denser version of Raphael that is still technically a Zen 4-based architecture, but that would not be called Raphael. Just like Bergamo to Genoa, that would be something entirely different. So, yeah, I mean, it's 16 cores. I can't say some of the details. of what made me even more confident, but there's multiple people now it is 16 cores.
And I don't think we need to go beyond 16 cores, 32 threads next year. I don't know, maybe the year after that, 24 cores will be a thing, but 16 cores for 3 generations is fine, especially if they're getting huge IPC increases over year, which that's a lot more important, really, than core counts at this point, because I don't know, we've said that many times. Would you rather have 50% more cores or 50% higher IPC per core? More IPC is better for gaming, at least.
Well, and it was funny, I actually just, when I was putting the notes for this episode of Broken Silicon together, I rewatched some of that Raphael leak I did back in May. And yeah, I mean, I really don't have much that I should need to add. I literally said in it that before I got to the PowerPoint slide, almost everyone I'm talking to says it tops out at 16 cores, but that at least internally at Intel, they're kind of operating under the conviction it's 24 cores because they know AMD could do it if they wanted to. And a big part of that video was talking about, is this stagnation if they've had 16 cores for 1, 2, 3, I guess technically this might be 4 generations if you count Zen 3D as its own generation. 4 gens in a row of 16 cores. And I expected more people in the comments of that leak to say, AMD's turning into Intel with quad cores now at 16. But actually, most of the comments said I could not care less if it is more than 16 cores.
That's a bit of a surprise to me. I mean, that'll be 3-4 years, I guess, on 16 cores, which I guess that is starting to get to the point where it will be a little long, but I don't know. We were stuck on 4 cores for 8 years almost? No, 6 or 7 years, right? Yeah.
And I would say that there's a lot of reasons so first of all, there's a lot of reasons AMD went to 16 cores, right? They were working with 4-core CCXs still with Zen 2. And so basically, and you think about how they organized the I/O die and they were designing it, it's like either they would have gone with some weird, moved to a 6-core CCX and then just do 2 of those. But then why would they already have the 4-core CCXs from the previous generation. So there's that lineage there on why they would have kept 4 plus 4 for a CCD. And if that's what they're going to do, then it made sense to just go to 16 right away. Both for that reason that it was kind of probably easiest to just do that. And also because, Intel, was still kind of keeping up with them pretty well back then. This was the time to really just hammer it home. But now they have. And there's really no sign, supposedly according to AMD sources, even that they think Raptor Lake will catch up in multi-threading with the IPC increases and core speed increases they're going to get with Zen 4, just still with 16 cores. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue that it just made all of the sense in the world back then to go straight to 16 from 8. And now it just makes a lot of sense to stay on 16 cores. Yeah, I guess I can't say more than that, but there are some specific design reasons that suggest that it was much, much easier to stick with 16, at least at first again.
I think with Raptor Lake being at 24 cores, there will probably be more of a motivation to increase core counts again after Zen 4. But I think it's really hard to guess what the future looks like with Intel, though, until you actually see more solid information on how Alder Lake will perform. Because, I don't know, 16 core of the little cores, we really don't know what that's going to look like yet.
To be fair, though, Lakefield has been out for a while to prepare for Big Little, and then Alder Lake will have been out for a year before, or almost a year probably, before Raptor Lake launches. And so that's a whole year of all of that, where they can prepare for Raptor Lake when they're like, all right, now we're assuming it's perfect. So we're just moving up in little cores. And, I was actually talking to someone at Intel today, and this person just goes, think about it. I mean, do we really need more than 8 big cores? I mean, maybe set 12 in, and then it's like, and maybe 16? But after that, shouldn't we just keep massively boosting the IPC with, adding as much cache as possible and other clocks, and then increasing clock speed for this 8 to 16 big cores as we can, and then just tons of little cores afterwards for multi-threading performance. So you can have the best of both worlds. Ideally, if you can get this working, that's really what we should be doing. That's what this person said.
That or more than 2 ASMT.
Well, yeah, definitely not right now. But I still wouldn't double down on it if it's in the next couple of years. And then also, the more I look at I get more information on the actual architectural changes coming to Zen 4. It's like, this is a big change. So it's like, you always got to think about how much work is going into these architecture tweaks between like a Zen 3 and a Zen 4. And then should we also add on top of that trying to get 24 cores working in a dense AM5 package, 40 by 40 millimeter square package? Like, should we try to also worry about that? It's kind of like with like RDNA 2, we got Infinity Cache working. Should we also rush 3D stacking into it now? Or should we just get this done? Because it works really well, way better than RDNA 1. And we'll worry about 3D stacking with RDNA 3. I know for a fact that that's something that's kind of gone on with Zen 3. The reason Zen 3, and I've said this before publicly, the reason Zen 3D is kind of a surprise announcement is Zen 3 was built in the die to allow for adding Vcache. But when Zen 3 was announced initially, all the way back in 2020, unveiled, they weren't sure if they would get the manufacturability to work before Zen 4 was out. And so they always had, like all the way back, the 5950X can have Vcache put on it. It's just they had the allotments in the silicon design to have that connection to the cache on top of it if they ever got it working. They just weren't sure if they'd get it working till Zen 4. And so that's taken a lot of work. So you're going to get probably a lineup with Zen 4 with Vcache on a lot of it, not just some of it. Yeah. And all of these other tweaks to the core architecture and the cache itself. That's probably them going, let's just focus on the IPC, because I'm expecting a bigger than Zen 3 IPC increase with Zen 4, like over 20%. Now, will it hit 30 or higher? I don't know if I go that far, but we'll see. And if they got like a 30% higher IPC increase again, I mean, that's really when it gets crazy to me. Like if I pull this up, like, because I have Zen 2, and you would just go, okay, well, Zen 3 is 1.2, let's say. Now let's multiply that by 1.3. I mean, we're looking at 56% higher IPC between Zen 4 and Zen 2, and it's coming out 2.5 years later. That's crazy.
It's arguably more exciting or more worthwhile, at least, than an increase in core counts. It's not another minuscule increase in IPC like when Intel was stagnating, like their big, exciting announcement was, I don't know, a 11% IPC increase or something.
Yeah, or like 10% with Haswell and 11% with Skylake, but it's actually 11% over Haswell. Don't pay attention to Broadwell, was already half of that. That type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, let us also remember this too. 7 nanometer was over 16 nanometer, or I guess 12 nanometer with Zen Plus, or whatever you want to call it, right? 16, 14, 12. That family of nodes that was used for Zen 1 and Zen Plus, 7 nanometer was like way better. 5 nanometer is better than 7, but N5 from TSMC is like, I think half, maybe not half the increase, but it's not as big of an increase as 7 was over 12 nanometer. And so because of that, you can't just assume it'd be easy to double core counts with that massive power usage again at the same time as doing anything else.
Yeah.
Root Knight writes in, with PCIe 5.0 planned for a consumer release in possibly less than 2 years, do you think it's likely for PCIe 4.0 to become a useless, in quotes, standard, in the sense that developers will either target 5.0 bandwidth for the extra performance or just stick to 3.0 support for the larger install base? I would just say no. I mean, if you think about it, in fact, the way you describe it, I don't think is really how that works either. But like PCIe 4.0 is what's in the current gen consoles, and we've had 2 years of X570, and it's still incredibly rare for a game to have double-digit performance gains over 3.0. You still see some instances where that's like happening, especially with like some console ports I know. But I would just say more bandwidth is more bandwidth. And 4.0 is more than 3, but less than 5. But it's not really, in quotes, necessary for max performance in the overwhelming majority of games. So no, I don't think so. I don't think you're going to see 1 year where it's just like, I don't think in 2 years it's going to be like, oh, this game was built for 5.0, so everyone with 4.0 is losing 20% performance. The consoles use it. It's more than enough. Even developers tell me it's more than enough bandwidth for graphics cards, even if 3.0 is a little long in the tooth. And I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. 5 is more, but it's not necessary. 4 is more than 3, but most games still don't even need that.
Yeah, I don't. 3 is still sufficient for most things, and even though you do see big performance losses or double-digit performance losses sometimes, but I don't think 5.0 is going to be a necessary standard anytime soon. Or once again, 3.0 is still arguably fine.
Yeah, I do. Rise Son of Rome was a crazy one.
Oh, okay.
Where PCIe 2.0 with some amount of lanes had like a way larger drop off. Like not like the usual, like, oh, another 5% if you go from 16 to ×8. It was like, if I remember correctly, Rise Son of Rome, when it was finally ported from Xbox One to PC, had this like massive drop off with some amounts of PCIe bandwidth. And it's clearly because they were doing something with that on the Xbox One to up performance for it. So I would say that it can happen. I just don't think, again, it's going to be like, well, now all games are built for 5.0, especially when the consoles use it. And again, developers don't even tell me they need more. So I'll just say, yeah, I'm not worried about it. But let us move on to some products that will probably have 5.0 support. With story number 2, AMD Chagall X3D and Zen 4 Threadripper existence and release timeframes leaked. And there's a right up here. For the past few months, Moore's Law is Dead has been spammed by comments losing their minds over the fact that we haven't done a Zen 3 Threadripper leak yet. This confused us, as everyone should know what it is without a leak. It's derived from Milan. Go look up Milan if you want to know what a Zen 3 Threadripper would be. No, this wasn't interesting to us until we could confirm additional info, and on July 15th, Moore's Law is Dead did. In summary, Zen 3 Threadripper Chagall is expected, or I guess it's actually pronounced Chagall, it's a French word, is expected to launch by November 2021. The top chip is 64-core 5990X, and the lineup is expected to cost more than before. I don't have exact pricing, but even if I did, it wouldn't matter because they haven't decided yet. But the prices I've seen proposed are a little more than what Zen 2 was. And when I look at the workstation Xeon Ice Lake chips coming out for like $6,000 for the 38 core, well, I mean, then AMD could charge $6,000 for their top 64 core if they wanted to. So that's all I would say. But continuing the summary, Zen 3 Threadripper Chagall is expected in November. Zen 3 Chagall Pro is tentatively planned to launch in January 2022. That's the 8-channel model with double the PCIe 4.0 lanes. And then surprisingly, Milan-X with Vcache is planned to launch as of now by the second half of 2022. There's no details on if it's a full lineup of Threadripper, with 64 cores and so on and so forth, but it's on the roadmap. And a 96-core Zen 4 Threadripper is planned right now for Q1 2023. Furthermore, Intel is not expected to have really any HEDT products until 2023. Remember, those Xeon Ice Lakes are workstation. And finishing the thoughts on this one, finally, it must be pointed out that AMD's HEDT cadence is starting to almost look a little Intel-like. Threadripper 1000 launched 2 months after Zen 1 Naples. Threadripper 3000 launched 4 months after Zen 2 Rome, and Threadripper 5000 is launching 6 months after Zen 3 Milan. And then Threadripper with Vcache is, of course, around 6 months after Milan-X probably launches, although not 100% sure. And Threadripper Zen 4 seems to be launching at least 6 months after Genoa. Intel's cadence for HEDT became 10 plus months after the server releases with Sandy Bridge E in 2011 and onwards, after Intel firmly crushed AMD and felt no need to be aggressive in HEDT anymore. And there are some worries that AMD could be already doing this, but who can blame them? All right, Dan, what do you got to say?
Well, we'll see if it's completely Intel. Like, it could be a mix if they keep with the 6 month cadence. Like, your leak seems to predict that they are going to have that 6-month delay by, 3 times in a row, I guess. But yeah, I mean, they're not competitive. Intel's not competitive with AMD and HEDT, so there's no real reason to get products to market that fast anymore. Like, Threadripper is coming out way later than it used to, and AMD doesn't need to do it any sooner, really.
And I did make the argument in this leak that, to be fair, if there was that, you could make the argument that Chagall is actually just a blip. That if you go back and look at it, you could simply make the argument that AMD brought Zen 3 to AM4, yes, a year before the Threadripper, but Milan wasn't even out yet. That AMD was actually intentionally bringing Zen 3 to gamers first because they knew they had a real win here for gamers. And that, yes, maybe Threadripper would have typically launched, closer to August or July, frankly, with the normal cadence, if we were following what Threadripper 1000 at least did. But that there's shortages and zero competition right now. If there was ever a Threadripper launch to be farther after the Epic counterpart, it would be this one. And that as of now, actually, it seems like Milan-X may come to Threadripper faster than Milan-based Threadripper did there. Said it correctly. But that, to also be fair, it's not out yet. So this is just one thing I know they're considering until AMD proves they're going back to a more aggressive cadence. I have no reason to believe they are. And Genoa and then the Zen 4 Threadripper, which does have its own code name, by the way, guys. I'm not saying it. That one looks like it could be coming like 8 months later or something. So I don't know. It's not quite to the 10 months of Intel, but it's getting dangerously close.
8 months is very close to 10 months if the cadence slips to that. So yeah, but as you said, AMD doesn't need to go to doesn't need to take an aggressive position if they don't really even have a competitor in a lot of ways at this point.
It sounds like,
at least in this space, they don't.
It sounds like 14 nanometer, 18 cores for Intel HEDT until the end of 2023 when they may launch Sapphire HEDT. Hopefully. I mean, my God.
And wait, how many cores would that I likely be, I guess?
Sapphire Rapids, I mean, at most it'd be 56. Yeah, so even then.
56 cores could be competitive against 64 with Threadripper, depending on the task you're doing. But yeah.
I don't think it'd be any better than a 64-core Milan-X, if that's out by then.
That's true. I'm just saying, having roughly or almost equivalent options, that does force AMD's hand a little more than an 18-core or that they competing with right now.
Yeah, and I guess it would be an interesting question if Intel would even do that, because if you look at what they're doing right now, you could say they've just given up on HEDT. Like they said, fine, we'll launch an 18-core because we can a few years ago, and then we're done because we're not going to even bother. But they did launch a 28-core workstation, and they are launching a 38-core workstation again. And this 38-core workstation chip isn't going to clock as high as, Threadrippers, but it's still going to be far better situation, a 10-nanometer 38-core versus, AMD's 64 cores than what they had before. It's just 14-nanometer 28-core against 64 cores. So Intel is, again, I keep saying this, people keep missing. Intel is making up lost ground here. Like they are not, I would argue they used to be less than half the performance per watt. Like they are slowly making up lost ground. So, I don't know. I wonder though what they will do with the reintroduction of HEDT. If they'll try to make like some really, really big splash and go, no, we are launching 56-core Sapphire Rapids to HEDT, or if they will limit that to workstation again and just launch maybe, like a 32-core version of it to a new HEDT platform. Because there's an argument to be made that HEDT may not need so many cores, but I don't know.
I mean, I guess I would want to see, like, people that are generally building high-end desktops, what core count do they usually want to go for? Because, yeah, maybe 64 or 56 cores HEDTs is super niche and arguably pointless from Intel's perspective.
You know what, though? Now that we've said that out loud, that's not true, though, because I know for a fact that the best-selling, I believe, Zen plus Threadripper was the 32-core, and that then that the 64-core for Zen 2, they couldn't keep it in stock. So actually, I don't think there's an argument for that.
Okay.
The only argument would be Intel wants to make a platform that tries to hit a lower entry point than what currently Threadripper, because Threadripper is expensive as heck now. It is not some budget HEDT platform it was originally created for. It is now insanely expensive. And that's the only reason I could see that, like, diverting into 2 again, where if they limited like their HEDT to 32 cores, but then still had the workstation, is if Intel said, we want to make the entry point platform cheaper than what AMD offers now, where I don't even know what the cheapest Threadripper motherboard is that's decent, but I think it's like $500 or more, and the cheapest processor's like, you know, like 1,400 plus.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the entry for Zen 3 is going to be like 1,500 or more. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Intel was like, well, this is so we can make a $300 motherboard or $400 motherboard with a entry point of like a $900 to $1,000 processor.
Yeah.
Again, I guess the only other thing I would say is I do not think you can just argue AMD is completely stagnating here, though. I mean, they have no reason to release anything in HEDT, and it will keep selling. They can't keep them in stock. And yet, guys, 1 year from now, they'll be preparing supposedly, a year from now, they'll have like some supposedly 3D stack generation. And then half a year from that, they're preparing a 96-core HEDT, supposedly. It wouldn't surprise me if they limited that to the Pro 8-channel one or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would just remind people that as much as you could say AMD's getting a little lazier, I don't know. They're releasing new crazy stuff every year still when they really don't need to.
If they have a generation of, if Zen 4 is the same core counts and a 10% IPC increase or 15% IPC increase, I'll be like, all right, they're kind of stagnating a little.
Yeah. Although, again, now that I think about it, what I know about what Intel has coming after 2023 sounds pretty insane, but I think the 96-core Threadripper is going to still probably raffle stomp anything Intel can release around it. So, I think actually AMD's probably pretty safe in HEDT till the end of 2023, to be honest, or at least till mid-2023. Ben Cannon writes in, he goes, I remember a while back you saying that it seems like weekly you are asked about the next HEDT platform from Intel. As it has been 2 months since I heard about it, I want to ask you again to annoy you. Have you heard anything about next-gen Intel HEDT? Well, Ben Cannon, I believe, already answered your question with that last conversation. But he does have another one. He says, my actual question is, what is the product coming up from each of the 3 major tech companies you are most interested in? And then he says, you can just say after Lunar Lake. I mean, honestly, like, we've got to be clear, though. Are we talking short-term or long-term? Because short-term, it's DG2. Like, I want to know if this happens, you know. And like, until it does, I'm going to be somewhat doubtful just because it's so new that Intel's getting into the GPU space in a real way, in a real non-integrated way. But besides that, no, I do think it is Lunar Lake. Like, I'll just say that what's in Lunar Lake specifically is what I'm most interested in. If not, I don't know, again, maybe DG2 or RDNA 3. What do you think is the most interesting thing coming? Obviously, don't say any code names or...
Oh, damn it. I was going to say all of the code. I mean, yeah, short term, Alder Lake and DG2. Long term, it's harder for me to say because it's really hard to even guess what they're going to look like completely long term.
Because a lot of them aren't finalized anyway, so.
Yeah, and a lot of it is very, very like theoretical at this point. So it's hard to point to what will come out. I mean, I guess semi long term RDNA 3. That's not that long term, though.
Yeah, I mean, and I would just say this too, especially anyone who's listening who's a leaker and thinks they know what Intel's doing. I mean, I've been kind of rounding up some info today, and a lot of Intel's roadmaps have just changed under Pat Gelsinger. Like, let me just say that to you too, Dan. Like, we haven't talked about this. That to say I know what I'm most excited about there's a lot of changes to what Pat's doing with how he's organizing multiple types of architectures. And the more I look at what AMD and Intel have coming, and of course, as people can see from my Bergamo and other AMD leaks recently, I'm now starting to get a lot of AMD stuff as well. I think there's this notion that it's like, this year, this launches, this year, this launches, this year, that launches. And it's more like this year, this family, and this family's product launches. And then this year, this family, this is what they're doing for dense compute. This is what they're doing for more traditional server. This is what they're doing for embedded. That there's actually a lot of different architectures coming every year pretty soon from both AMD and Intel. And that if someone's quote unquote planned or leaked roadmap is just like one server thing from Intel a year, they have more than one thing coming after 2023, after 2022 every year, and so does AMD. So I'm not spoiling anything from either company. Like, this is going to get hard to keep track of in a good way.
Well,
guys.
In an arguably good way, because being hard to keep track of things is always annoying.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I seem to enjoy it. All right, let us move on to story number 3. More FSR games launched, including in DLSS titles, Xbox Series X, and PS5. And I have a write-up on July 7th, where Lazed tweeted that people should expect a deluge of additional FSR launches on July 16th, that this day would mark FSR coming to DLSS games, not just other games that don't have DLSS or FSR. And yep, that happened. In summary, many more games, including Resident Evil 8, have added FSR support. Hired Gun and others also have FSR now, despite already having DLSS, putting to rest the worries that NVIDIA would block out adding FSR to DLSS games. Some comparisons are already showing that multiple games that have both DLSS and FSR support show no visual differences in quality between the FSR offering, despite the FSR offering having lower latency at times and far greater GPU support and often a higher performance boost, though it depends on which performance boost you're comparing, of course. And then the Edge of Eternity dev has already confirmed the PS5 and PS4 will have FSR support, of course, along with the Xbox versions. But this is noticeable to highlight the PS5 and PS4 because Xbox has already talked about adding FSR to Series X during their Windows 11 event, and Sony, as usual, is quiet. They don't even have adaptive sync yet. So I'm just saying it's good that we now know FSR is coming to PS5 very soon. And then furthermore, last thing I want to say, Far Cry 6 and many more AAA games are already announcing having FSR support at launch. And this is not something DLSS could claim in its first year. For example, Red Dead Redemption 2 just got DLSS support 2 years after its PC release. So in conclusion, FSR's adoption continues at a breakneck pace compared to DLSS. But yes, DLSS is also all of a sudden aggressively coming to more games at the same time. Competition is good. I don't know. What do you think about all of this, Dan?
Once again, I want to see how adoption continues to happen because what they just released, they just released like the information to easily integrate it into their into games, right? So yeah. I assume it's going to keep getting integrated into games. Like when they had dev said that they integrated FSR in 2 hours. So I don't know. Hopefully in the next 6 months, slowly just every game or a bunch of games get it because FSR needs to outcompete DLSS or earlier versions of DLSS if it wants to become this huge mainstay, which I think it's going to.
Both in adoption and quality, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. I think there's probably some correlation maybe to DLSS suddenly getting more support in adoption. And I'm glad to see that this early on games already have DLSS and FSR because that means a bunch of games are going to have both, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's very exciting to see so many games just, and I'm testing an RTX 3060 right now, and all the so many games that didn't used to have DLSS are all getting it right now, and they're getting FSR, and FSR quality is going up, and I know an FSR 2.0 is coming out sooner than people think. So again, when you look at, Unreal Engine's TSR, the ways some games are adding just a resolution scale TAA injection, it's I just think in about a year, every game's going to have It's just going to be like, what monitor do you have? Okay, run it at the resolution of your monitor. Most people will want at least 1440p. And then if it's not getting the frame rate you want, change the settings until you can't tell the difference, whether it's high, medium, or ultra. And then after that, if you need more performance, turn on DLSS or FSR and you're done. You just now have consistent frames. And I'm actually extra excited for when some games, I assume, will just start coming with like a dynamic FSR and dynamic resolution DLSS kind of built in from the start, so I don't have to do anything.
I want FSR and DLSS, but to improve before I see that, because there are some pretty big losses in quality to whatever the top model of FSR is. I think it's just quality mode, right?
Ultra, because Ultra sounds bigger than NVIDIA's quality.
Oh yeah. Which you have to sound bigger than the other.
Which now NVIDIA's about to add Ultra mode for DLSS, because you can't have that.
I love marketing.
Yeah.
But no, like once you start getting into like the balanced and especially performance modes on FSR, it looks pretty crappy based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah. I would think when it comes to DLSS dynamic resolution, I believe a couple games have it, but it's like, I assume you need a pretty high setting for DLSS for that. Because again, when I've tried ultra performance mode with DLSS, like there will just be objects that change shapes in the background while moving. So I would be a little scared if they were doing that dynamically with resolution in some games. But I assume eventually they can get something working.
It turns into like the like Google's what is it, like Deep AI, where they assemble images, and it's where they assemble images based on a deep AI, and it, I don't know, creates some like LSD trippy looking effects.
Let us move on to story number 4. Nintendo Switch OLED announced. I'm quoting from The Verge. Nintendo is announcing a new Switch model today with a larger 7-inch 720p OLED display. Well, rumors had suggested this new Switch would ship with a new NVIDIA chip inside that offered higher performance. This new OLED model is mostly just a screen upgrade. Nintendo lists the Switch OLED model as only supporting 1080p via TV mode, and rumors that suggested some 4K support with DLSS are not to be seen. The model will start at $350 and go on sale on October 8th. Other than that new screen, the revised model includes an adjustable stand for tabletop play, 64 gigabytes of built-in storage from the previous 32, a new dock with a wired Ethernet port built in, and improved audio for handheld or tabletop play. Nintendo only mentions up to 1080p via HDMI TV mode for the TV dock, so the rumored 4K mode definitely isn't part of it. Nintendo has confirmed to The Verge that there are no internal changes at all. So again, because there were people still speculating, could there be? It's like, no, there is nothing else. Yeah, I mean, this was pretty interesting. I guess I don't follow anyone that doubled down on it, actually, more I think about it, or I don't think I do. But I've heard that there were some leakers that ate just a ton of shit when it was announced with no extra specs.
Yeah, and, that's disappointing. But I think we said like probably a month ago that they bought 30 million more Tegra SoCs. I guess that's what the remaining 30 million are going into, or most of them are going into these OLED switches.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, like, there were two kind of leak analysis videos I was working on for a while. One was Threadripper stuff, and then the other one was, I'll just tell everyone now, involving some stuff with NVIDIA and Switch. And I decided... it was actually after the OLED model was announced that I was really getting into it heavily. So it didn't really have to do with that model. But I decided that I was so far down the rabbit hole every time I kept doing the Switch 2 research that I just had to stop and get this Threadripper video done, or it'd be like a week or 2 weeks of no video. So I'm still working on that. And yeah, I don't know how much to say because I don't want to reveal everything I'm going to go into in an upcoming video yet. But, I talk about in Nintendo's strategy a lot with the previous game dev that was on from Massive Damage. I assume I'll talk with, what's his name, Chris from Sony Santa Monica. Because, again, this every dev I talk to just loves talking about Nintendo rumors because we never get to talk about this stuff. So I'm sure we'll get into it there. So, submit those reader mails. But, there's a lot of connections here, and it's like you look around and you go, so there were some websites, like I believe Bloomberg, who said the OLED model was coming, but also there's another SoC. Those two things can still be true, guys. And, if you think about Nintendo buying up the remaining Maxwell-based Tegras and then raising the price, basically, of the Switch, it's almost like they know they have a limited amount of APUs to sell, Dan, over the next year, and they're raising the price because they know they have a limited amount.
I wonder
why they would do that and why they bought up the remaining Tegra but stopped production.
Yeah.
When did the DSi XL come out before the 3DS came out? Under 2 years, didn't it, people?
Yeah.
That's all I'll say for now.
Broadly speaking, though, to get off of that, I think this is a pretty disappointing announcement, just putting it bluntly. It's great. They raised the price of the Switch, which uses... How old's the tech on that thing now? Like 6 years old?
Well, right. And I think it came out in 2017, if I remember correctly. But remember, it's based on Maxwell. So
yeah. So how old's the tech? Like 6 years old, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's a little disappointing. I guess it's impressive that they keep getting games to run on that thing. But I think they need something new at some point.
There's a lot of things I would do differently if I was a Nintendo, but yet Nintendo's making gangbusters money off of the Switch and can't keep them in stock. So should you really ask me my opinion on what they should do with this console anyways? Because they're doing fine.
They've seemed to have stumbled across a really, really good strategy.
Yeah.
To making a ton of money. So I don't know what I can really criticize them on from a business perspective.
Gosh, Reesie, why does Windows 10 Professional have to be so expensive? Don't listen to that, nerd. Listen to me. You can get all the great Windows and gaming keys you need at CDK Offers. I have a plan. Go to cdkoffers.com to get all the Windows Professional and Microsoft Office keys you need, and games as well. Add them to your cart, and you can even apply one of them City Slicker promotional codes like DashRing for 3% off software and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows codes. I do have an account on this website, and it is ultra easy to use. Just submit your order, use PayPal, credit card, or Bitcoin, and go to Windows website to download Microsoft Professional. One more time, that's go to cdkoffers.com. They are a fantastic sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead. Use offer code DashRing for 3% off everything on the website, and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows products. Now, back to the show.
All right, let us then move on to story number 5. Steam Deck and Van Gogh confirmed. And here we go. I believe I'm quoting here from The Verge again. Valve just announced the Steam Deck, its long-rumored Switch-like handheld gaming device. It will begin shipping in December, and reservations opened on July 16th. And starting at $399, although there were $529 and $649 models as well. The device has an AMD APU containing a quad-core Zen 2 CPU with 8 threads and 8 compute units worth of AMD RDNA 2 graphics, alongside 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM. There are 3 different storage tiers: 64 gigabytes of eMMC, for the $399 entry model, 256 gigabytes of an NVMe SSD for $529, and then a 512 gigabyte high-speed NVMe SSD for $650, according to Valve. You can also expand the available storage with a micro SD card slot, although I have another link showing the SSD is not meant to be upgraded, though, but you can add a micro SD slot. As for the battery life, Steam Deck's onboard 40 watt-hour battery provides several hours of playtime for most games, in quotes. That's what Valve says. For lighter use case gaming, smaller 2D games, or web browsing, you can expect a maximum battery life of approximately 7 to 8 hours. And Valve tells IGN that you can play Portal 2 for 4 hours on this thing. And if you limit it to 30 FPS, you can be playing for 5 to 6 hours, which I would just point out, okay, well, that's a really old game, but anyways, I mean, you could almost argue that's kind of like arguing a newer 2D game. And if you need to pause your game, the Steam Deck offers a quick suspend resume feature built into the Steam OS that will let you put the device into sleep mode and pick up where you left off later, which is modern console. The Vita did that too, which was really useful for a mobile gaming device. On the software side of things, the Steam Deck runs what Valve is calling a new version of Steam OS that's optimized for the handheld's mobile form factor, but the actual OS is based on Linux and will use Proton as a compatibility layer to allow Windows-based games to run without requiring the developers specifically port them for the Steam Deck. And in fact, there's other articles going around talking about how Valve is reaching out to studios to make sure their anti-cheating software doesn't flag Linux distros as cheaters. So Steam, this also is kind of an unofficial half reboot of SteamOS as well, it seems, actually, working on higher compatibility.
Especially because I think they're also encouraging other companies to make new things that use SteamOS now, or handhelds that use SteamOS. So I don't know if we'll see in the next 2 years or so a different handheld that uses SteamOS come out that it gains some prominence, but there's always a chance.
So there have been rumors about a Steam handheld going around, I believe, for the past 2 months. Mm-hmm. But the actual day this was announced, I mean, it was a little surprising to me. I mean, maybe, I'm just busy, so I didn't see it coming that day, but it's just like I saw it and I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, I remember I was in lab and I just got a random Google alert, Steam Deck. It's like, oh, cool, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess another thing to add on top of this is a lot of people jumping in and going, well, there it is. Tom was right about Van Gogh. A lot of gloating by executable fix as well. Well-deserved, I believe, by him, as usual. And I actually haven't seen the exact links or quotes from others. I've seen some people suggest in comments that it might not be Van Gogh. And my only response to these were, well, go to my Van Gogh leak where I detailed a quad-core Zen 2 with 8 RDNA 2 compute units that has LPDDR5 and is seemingly built for handheld gaming. I guess maybe they won't. If they don't call this Van Gogh, I detailed exactly what just came out. And in fact, there have been several leakers that said, was it Aerith? Maybe no, I think it was Aerith, that there was another code name kind of being used with Van Gogh as well. So I don't know if either this is just they had several code names for it, which let me point out to people. Right now, for Zen 3D, internally at AMD, and again, you can choose not to believe me, but right now in AMD, guys, if you believe me on other stuff, you should believe me on this. It's the same sources. They're calling some of the Zen 3D refresh products Vermeer-X, Zen 3D, which is my favorite name, and even Warhol sometimes, even though Warhol used to be something else. So to say they couldn't call this both Van Gogh and Aerith, or was it Miro or Aero? I don't remember. It wouldn't surprise me if there were multiple code names this was referred to as. And in fact, the more I go down the code name rabbit hole at AMD, it is a lot less consistent than Intel's, guys. they that's all I can really say. And so whether it's Van Gogh or not, I detailed this exact APU from start to finish, top to bottom. So call it Van Gogh if you want or don't want to. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would be funny if Van Gogh was some other project that existed, and then for some reason they got conflated with whatever you were told. But I don't know.
No,
you had this exact same. You had this exact same thing, whether they call it Van Gogh or not.
And it could be some custom version, slightly tweaked version of Van Gogh for Valve, because Van Gogh, to my understanding, at least what I heard, was originally kind of planned for the Microsoft Surface as a competitor to the quad-core Tiger Lake. And that was actually supposed to come out, I think, earlier this year, and it just never did. Some deal fell through with Microsoft, is my understanding. And so if that got canned, but then Valve was like, we'll take it, which is kind of what I think actually happened. It wouldn't surprise me if they were like, well, also do a couple other changes to like the BIOS or, like the software side of it or something, because there are, like, if you go back, for example, to I think it was called the Ryzen 3780U. This was the quote unquote custom Microsoft Surface AMD APU on 12 nanometer. It was, to my memory, really just a repurposed version of an embedded 12 nanometer APU from AMD. And yet they called it its own thing. So
there's always that possibility too.
You know what I mean? But was it its own thing? Was it? Like, and so I would just go as far as to say, if they call it something else, it might be that kind of situation there as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the Steam Deck?
I don't think I'll be buying it, but it's a cool competitor kind of to the Switch. Or it's not really a competitor. It's substantially stronger than the Switch as far as I can tell. The battery life isn't great. That's my big concern. And I wish I kind of wish the base was the 256 gigabyte at $400, but that might be asking for too much.
So I still need to reach back out to this person, but there's one of my dev sources, actually from a big AAA, not the next guest, someone else, that I was talking to, and he's like, he kind of doesn't think it's going to do well. It's simply because devs are impressed by it, but a lot of devs think this doesn't have enough storage. I want to talk to a couple devs again. It's like most of the devs I've talked to have kind of said that it's like a lukewarm thing where it's really impressive and the initial sales will probably be high, but they're not sure. They're not sure it'll have follow-through sales outside of the initial hardcore millions of people. Because again, I think this will sell well at first. I think it will sell out. I think it'll sell millions at first. But I don't know what the legs on it are going to be.
I mean, I think this is a big test of if a product like this is anything more than a niche product. Because if I had to place money on one side, I think I would go that it's at least semi-niche. Like, not like PSVR level niche, maybe. Where it gets a decent install base, but I don't think everyone that games on PC is going to be going out to get a Steam Deck.
No, and there's just, honestly, a lot of the developers so far that I've talked to are concerned about Valve's follow-through because, I mean, let's just be honest. They announced SteamOS, and it has its defenders, but look, say what whoever's listening to this, say what your opinion is of SteamOS. And I don't think it's terrible at all, but I'm telling you, if you're listening, the developers I've talked to were very disappointed in Valve's follow-through. This isn't my opinion. This is a lot of people I talked to, that there was this big fanfare. Oh, there's going to be an Alienware one. There's going to be an Origin PC one. And we're going to do all of this stuff. And then they just almost overnight, like a year after it came out, did nothing with it. And a lot of developers saw that and they went, well, so we really shouldn't take anything Valve launches in the future seriously ever again. And so there's a lot of apprehension based on what happened with SteamOS with this. I'm not saying it can't be different this time, though, and I sure want it to be.
And like I said earlier, the fact that they're already pressing this angle of encouraging other developers to make a handheld, I almost wonder if this is like some pilot. I don't know what exactly you would call it, like almost like this pilot launch to try to get SteamOS out where maybe they don't even sell that many Steam Decks and, I don't know, third-party Steam Decks start coming out, and that's ultimately where they push the OS. I don't know why exactly they would want to do that over selling their own hardware unless they're selling this at a loss.
Yeah. And if you look at the battery life as well, it actually, depending on how you look at it, has a good battery life. Like 8 hours web browsing, for the size of it, that's pretty good. But if you're running a AAA game at 800p, which is 16 by 10 display, it's like, I mean, it would not surprise me that dies in a few hours. So let's remember, most gaming laptops, if they even let you game on battery with a dedicated card or whatever, like I could with my MX250 laptop, that worked okay. Even if I use that, I would have to like lower the core. I limited, I believe, the core clock on my i7 to like 1.6 gigahertz. And that that would have about a few hours of battery life. So it's still matching the mobile gaming laptops that are out there. It's not, so I don't know. It depends how you look at it though, but it does kind of highlight the weaknesses in trying to make a handheld PC gaming device, that I would go as far as to say that if they have a follow-up one, that it all should be about lowering power consumption more so than increasing performance, that they just got to make sure they have enough performance, you know?
I'm also curious, like, this is obviously built for gaming, but it is an interesting thing. Like, you can install Windows on it. So you do have this tiny little PC that you can transport with wherever you want to go with you, and it also has a docking station. That does sound useful for some people. It's a cool device at a minimum, and I'm curious what like communities is really going to evolve out of this if it gets somewhat big.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, the fact that it does run a version of Linux, though, I go, okay, but if I get this, guys, I'm not going to get this. Probably I'm not going to get this and also have my studio laptop. I would want this to replace my studio laptop as a more portable option. And and again, this is my opinion. People don't have to agree with me. But when I look at like pictures of this, it's not that small. I think for me, the PlayStation Vita was the biggest I would want in a handheld. That really smaller than that and smaller than the Switch, where it can truly fit in my pocket, like really be a handheld, really be that. That's really what I'm not looking for something that can fit in my backpack, because then I'll just bring my laptop.
I mean, this is like the size of a tablet so it has a 7-inch screen. So it's like the size of a tablet that you cut some of the width off and then just add that to the thickness of it. Yeah. So yeah, it's not perfect, like size wise. I agree. I would like to see it a little smaller. You would want. Yeah, and actually, I do want to. I'm curious what you think. So it has the trackpad analog sticks.
I saw that. That's interesting.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't think.
Oh.
I think I would have preferred they would have just picked one. So I think the idea is so you can choose which one you want to use, and it's like you tell me which one you want to use, because those analog sticks are kind of in a bad position. Well, and they were talking about this on the on Sacred Symbols this week, I believe, the Steam Deck, and Colin Moriarty brought up a good point. Like, there's a lot of muscle memory that all controllers are designed around, and having the analog stick in line with the face buttons,
that's not. I mean,
is completely
like Xbox. They're always
Xbox. They're always up and a little bit offset from the analog sticks.
Yeah, and if I'm like holding an Xbox controller like I'm holding right now, you'd want to move your thumb down to the left, or like no, this is just not like either the PlayStation or Xbox controller. So,
or any controller that's been launched in like since the PS2.
But we haven't held it, so we don't know if it's actually a problem or not. But that is worth.
Yeah, that's true.
And another thing I'm thinking about if they were going to make it more compact, you know what though? This is kind of marketed to play AAA PC games. The smaller you make it, the harder it's going to be to get a real grip on it. Like, I remember, they didn't have 2 analog sticks, for example, on the PSP, but they kind of said we tried it on this size, and it was really cramping people's fingers to try to control 2 analog sticks. That's why the Vita, one reason the Vita was a little bigger. And even then, just because you have 2 analog sticks does not mean you're as accurate as using like an Xbox controller that's far bigger and allows more precision with your thumb, nor, of course, as accurate as a mouse or close to that. So I do wonder, though, if they tried to make this smaller, if it just like you're not playing Control with it smaller, because the controls are just terrible.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a major concern I would have with playing AAA games on this, is how much of the controller interface is this assumption that you have this level of accuracy. Because if you remember like 3DS or PSP shooters, like they would have you use like the either the directional button or like the triangle, square, X, circle as the aiming. But the game knew that you were terrible at aiming because you're using a PSP, so the difficulty corresponded to that. If you're playing Control or like a Twitch shooter, if you're playing Doom on this, and it's built for the PC version and expects you to be really accurate with a mouse. Like I play Doom with a mouse on PC. I don't know. I guess those are our concerns. I guess we actually had quite a bit to say about this. Again, though, we haven't really held it. I kind of want to try it out, though. It is interesting, and I do hope it succeeds.
It's interesting. Once again, I don't think I'll get it because I just don't think I would have a super strong use for it, but it's interesting.
Well, and I hope that what they're doing with Proton compatibility really does get very, very good, because having competition to Windows and gaming is, I just think, so overdue now. And
apropos to our SteamOS discussion, with Die Shrink, whenever that released, I read stuff about how Proton really fixes issues with SteamOS, and like there's a whole database that shows most games work fine on SteamOS. But then when you really look at it, it's like this has Platinum certification, which is the highest or second highest level of certification you can have on that database. And then you read like user responses to its performance, and it's still like 1 out of 15 says it doesn't work. So
yeah, it still has a ways to go.
Yeah, I would want to at least experience using Linux myself to see like how accurate are those rankings that you see. Like, does it really functionally work for pretty much every game, or does it functionally work for most games for most people, or what?
Yeah, the final thing I want to touch on is, you mentioned Colin Moriarty. They were talking about this and how from his perspective, he was saying he can't believe Sony hasn't released some follow-up to the Vita or something. And it got me because like, a large thing I've heard is that a reason Valve's swooping in is just because they see this as kind of a safe bet. They are a very conservative company. They are. They don't do anything but sell hats anymore. like they do not like making risks. And yet they clearly said, Nintendo has no competition in handheld. There's a bunch of these like really kind of sketchy Kickstarter handheld Windows gaming devices that we don't think are the quality they should be. And also, it seems like Microsoft just didn't use Van Gogh. So there's a chance here we could just swoop in with the perfect APU for the perfect competition to a space without a lot of competition right now and make this. You know, how crazy it is that Microsoft and Sony haven't tried to make a gaming handheld themselves. And I don't know if you had any thoughts on if they should enter that, because I hear that there's like zero interest right now from Sony. Of course, they throw around ideas every now and then. Yeah. And, you know, it's not like they aren't talking about it, but it's like very, very little talking about it.
I mean, like they were talking about if they could just straight up have like a base PS4 handheld, that would be really cool. Yep. Which this level of performance, I'm not saying they could just throw a Van Gogh into the PS and call it a PS4 portable, because they would need to do a lot of customizations to get things to work from the PS4 to this with like seamlessly, which I don't think they would do, but this is roughly as strong as a PS4, I would think. So,
yeah,
or stronger.
Well, the CPU is obviously stronger. It's got more RAM. The graphics card is, probably stronger. Yeah, it's probably a little stronger.
A compute units, Jesus, of RDNA 2 clocked more than twice as fast, right? Like,
yeah, but
it's probably stronger.
It's like, probably 50% higher. This is not perfect, so everyone calm down. But, 50% higher per compute unit performance before we talk about clock speeds than the PS4. And then I think that had 18 compute units, I want to say, enabled. So if that's true, and then it's clocked higher. Yeah, it should be a bit stronger than a PS4's graphics card. And definitely not as strong as a PS4 Pro, though. And then, of course, a much stronger CPU. I going back, though, to if Sony should release one or Microsoft, I would just say that the more I think about it, I would actually advise that, if Microsoft were to make a gaming handheld, that what they need it to do is be the same performance as the Series S. That's what they need to do. And if that can't come out this year, I don't think it can at a reasonable price or power consumption, then don't do it. and you just wait and then release it. Because the more I think about it, the more it's like, the Vita failed because it's like they put an Uncharted on it, but it wasn't Uncharted, it wasn't Uncharted 4. And to split up your catalog is just a mistake. You want to carry over all of the games you have on Xbox or PlayStation. And so I think what Sony would actually want to try to do is release some version of a PS5S that literally can play all PS5 games, and that they shouldn't even bother with a handheld until that's what it is. I would go as far as to say I don't think they should make it a PS4 portable. It should be a PS5 portable, and they should just wait.
That would probably be a better long-term strategy, but I don't think it's a good idea to keep making products anymore that like segment your games into two different silos.
Right. That's why I'm saying they would have to do that. And I'm not even saying they should literally wait until they can shrink, the 200-watt PS5 into 10 watts or something. I'm saying, like, you could even make it an 8 compute unit version so it can do the backwards compatibility to PS4. Like, you could literally just do like a half one and be like, yeah, all we do is we built it so that devs know that the performance mode, runs like the resolution mode, or you know what I mean? Like, that's all they would need to do is it's like, no, just anything running on PS5 is now half the resolution. It has the same CPU. Like, I could see them doing that in a few years, and that's the only thing that I think would work. Same goes for Xbox. Just make a portable Series S. Because if you try anything else, if you split up the catalog, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I would go as far as to say that I don't think actually an Android version is what anyone wants. Like, if we look around.
Those failed. No.
Yeah. I know some people will write in and say they want it, but Slick Willie writes in, and he says, "Hi, Tom and Dan. I got to ask, what are your guys' thoughts on the Steam Deck? I know it has been covered to the oblivion by almost every tech tuber and tech site. I think we just did with that extended conversation. But do you think the combination of SteamOS, a Van Gogh APU, and Proton will give it the possibility to be a successful launch and product? Also, with the hype, specs, and everything else, does it just pass the sniff test? I think it does."
Yeah, it's a while until it comes out, which actually that was another thing we forgot to bring up. It doesn't come out till next year, which...
Wait, what?
Yeah.
No.
Comes out Q2 next year.
Oh, I did miss that. Jesus. Well, yeah, and it will still be the strongest gaming handheld at that time, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think we've covered our opinions on it quite thoroughly. I would just say that right now, I think it passes the sniff test. I'm just not. Yeah, I'm just not sure it'll be a runaway success, right? Although I would not be surprised if its first, month sales were insane, especially for like a PC type release.
It'll sell well at first. I have no guess onto what its legs will be, though.
Kras writes in, "Hi, Tom and Dan. Thanks for the Die Shrink 50. It was really cool to look back at the history and future of SteamOS and Steam-branded devices." Yeah, that actually came out right when this, it was recorded, of course, before that, but it came out right when this was announced. We did not plan to do that, and so far that's been a very popular episode. But he goes, "I think you missed one key factor in your evaluation of the Steam Deck, which is the way it is being pushed. With the first SteamOS releases, they were trying to convince developers to do Linux ports. This time around, all over the pages on their Steam Deck.com website, they are just saying things like your Steam library is available. There's no caveats given that statement. It's essentially it's all available." Well, there are caveats. It uses Proton, and as Dan covered, most people, if it has platinum status, most people don't have issues, but there's still usually like a 1 in 20 that does.
And that's not a perfect sorting factor. I bet, as with all things, when people are pissed off, they probably go to complain about it more often. So maybe it's not 1 in 20, maybe it's 1 in 40 or 1 in 50 or whatever. And maybe it is still Q2 2022. So I'm going to assume that means June of 2022. It's still 11 months away. It's still 9 to 11 months away. I would probably put my money in closer to 11. Maybe there will be a big push to get compatibility working better in that time frame.
This is what they're working on right now.
Yeah, but go on.
Yeah, and he continues, "And while I know it's not 100% true that you can play all games with Proton, and in particular, there are some games, especially a few popular competitive games with extremely aggressive anti-cheat detection that flip out when under Linux. Reportedly, Valve has already reached out to those game developers, asking them to please dial back their anti-cheat or make a modification so it can work on SteamOS. Maybe doing it in the order they've done it is somewhat brilliant, actually. They made their no caveat bluster, and now they can go to those developers and say, we got 500,000 reservations for this thing in North America and Western Europe alone in 4 hours, and now we're not able to offer more reservations until Q2 2022. Do you really want to deny that Steam Deck users playing, insert game here, don't want you to make sure it works on release? That is true. That was probably a really wise thing to do, so they could just go, hey guys, this is blowing up in the news. Make sure your game works.
That could happen, although once again, I'm skeptical of how much it's going to increase the size of the Steam gaming market, because I think most people buying this are going to own a PC already. That's my assumption, at least.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's like, well, do we need to make sure this works? Is anyone going to get this and play Warzone? I don't know if that's one of the games that has problems with Proton, but and I think that's a fair point I've heard some people say as well. Like, yes, it can run AAA games, but the people buying this are probably to play some of their AAA games on the go. Is anyone actually going to be playing games like Counter-Strike on this competitively? I mean, come on.
Well, Counter-Strike works on Proton.
Yeah, I know.
But no, I'm looking at the Proton database right now, and it's definitely a lot better. But I do have to point out, PUBG, Apex Legends, Destiny 2, and Rainbow Six Siege all don't work on Proton using Proton right now.
Yeah.
So they have a year. They have a lot to get. They do have a lot to expand, and maybe that is a big argument they're going to try to make, is get your shit working on Steam, because there are going to be several million people actually trying to use it now. But so I don't know. Maybe this will be a big push to try to get it to work better, but we'll see. I just don't. I don't know how much it's expanding the market, though, so I don't know if some devs will be completely unconvinced by that argument.
I would just say that if you're bringing up our discussion on the original SteamOS launch, that really is a different circumstance. I think in short term, this Proton solution that's already out, of course, is a far better solution for making sure there's a lot of games you can play at launch. But at the end of the day, none of them are going to work perfectly for the most part, unless they were natively designed for Linux. And so I guess it just depends how you look at it. When Valve announced SteamOS, the assumption was that they wanted to get developers to work on Linux natively, because this was going to have a lot of follow-throughs. Multi-billion-dollar company. Gabe Newell's a billionaire. He's going for it. But there was no follow-through. So I guess there's less follow-through required for this to work. But I would still wonder where this plays into if they're actually making some big initiative for SteamOS again. Because you could almost argue going with Proton as them going, we're never going to actually try to threaten Windows. Because it relies on the game being on Windows first, guys. So just don't forget that. But I think we should move on. If you have any other thing to say, again, put it in the reader mail channels. I'm sure that there's a lot more discussion to be had on this. All right, let us move on to the final main story then. Story number 6. Intel in talks to buy GlobalFoundries for about $30 billion. And I'm quoting from the Wall Street Journal. Intel Corp is exploring a deal to buy GlobalFoundries Inc., according to people familiar with the matter, and a move that would turbocharge the semiconductor giant's plans to make more chips for other tech companies and rate as its largest acquisition ever. A deal could value GlobalFoundries at around $30 billion, people have said. It isn't guaranteed one will come together, though, and GlobalFoundries could proceed with a planned initial public offering that has already been rumored. But GlobalFoundries is owned by Mubadala Investment Co., an investment firm of the Abu Dhabi government, and based in the U.S. Any talks don't appear to include GlobalFoundries executives. A spokeswoman for the company said it isn't in discussions with Intel. Intel's new chief executive, Pat Gelsinger, in March said the company would launch a major push to become a chip manufacturer for others, a market dominated by Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Co. Intel, with a market value of around $225 billion this year, pledged more than $20 billion in investments to expand chip-making facilities in the U.S. Mr. Gelsinger has said more commitments domestically and abroad are in the works. And I will add that I did talk to a source about this, And well, this individual cannot confirm how likely it is to go through, that this is highly likely, a very real thing, though, that Intel is working on, and that people need to remember that a lot of this has to do both with expanding its ability to make chips for other people, which Gelsinger is saying he wants to do, and also about security in manufacturing. GlobalFoundries' most advanced fabs, if I remember correctly, are in New York and Vermont, thus securing U.S.-based manufacturing for Intel if they buy them.
That's all in line then with Pat Gelsinger's medium-term goals or stated goals for the next few years. But I don't like corporate consolidation. I think there's already too much of it to begin with. I don't know if Intel is the biggest worry among the all tech companies, but they've definitely been anti-consumer in the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, what worries me about this, though, is it's like, and I think I put this down here in the notes, is it's like AMD is getting real buddy-buddy with TSMC. Some people have argued to me they're a wing of TSMC now. And then you have, Intel has its own fabs already. Samsung's working with NVIDIA, but they're behind TSMC right now. And I suspect they may fall behind Intel in 3 years again. We'll see about that. I'm not sure. But the point really being, it's really, I don't know, TSMC's in charge. Intel has its own fabs. I kind of like there being two other ones, Samsung and GlobalFoundries, even if GlobalFoundries is behind right now, as options. And if Intel buys GlobalFoundries, that makes it basically just Samsung for... Because, Apple is buying up so much of TSMC, and so is AMD now, and a couple other companies that you just go, I really liked GlobalFoundries being its own thing. And so that's one thing I would say, that's my own opinion. But then over here, if you will, to the side, maybe riding shotgun in the opinion car, my other opinion would be that if I was Intel, this may be a very good acquisition. So it's possible for me to understand both that this would possibly be a very good move for Intel, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want it to happen.
Yeah. And also,
Same with ARM, by the way, NVIDIA buying ARM. Probably a good move. Doesn't mean I want it to happen.
Well, that's what antitrust cases are for. What's best for the company isn't always best for the market. But no, I also did just look it up. So the most advanced fabs are in New York and Dresden, Germany.
Vermont. What's
Vermont is 90 nanometer.
It is? I may have misread something then, or an out-of-date thing. Okay, then. But that moves it out of Asia. Either way.
That's true. Yeah.
And so it really does make a lot of sense. I'm not sure how much more you have to add about it, but another thing I kind of want to point out to everybody is I remember how many people were saying, oh, is Intel going to spin off their fabs? Oh, is Intel going to spin off their fabs? No. And I remember thinking maybe not a few years ago, but I think people will notice that the more we talk on Broken Silicon about it the past year, I've kind of been like, I don't think so. And now I'm firmly in the camp of they're not. And I think you could make the argument that maybe 5-6 years ago, if hindsight's allowed to be 2020 here, Intel should have spun it off while they were having issues, gone to TSMC, bought up a ton of capacity, made good with TSMC, maybe at the same time as AMD, and that would have benefited them, but they didn't. And in the current world, everyone wants chips. So having your own fabs firmly under your control is not a lot of people that can do that. So I don't see Intel spinning this off anytime soon. And in fact, from some discussions I've had with people, it's like there's a real asset to having full design control over both an architecture and the fab you're working at for 3D stacking. Because I've said this a few times on Broken Silicon. I don't know if you guys know this. It's kind of hard to do 3D stacking. It's really complicated. A lot can go wrong. Having full control over the fab and the architecture you're designing is an asset in a tile future.
Well, yeah. I mean, 3D stacking makes cooling way, way more difficult, correct?
Well, yeah, there's so many things that can go wrong in the packaging process. I would say, right now, GlobalFoundries is, around They got 12 nanometer type nodes. It's just like Intel may go, so we don't need all of the tiles to be 10 nanometer or 7 nanometer. We'll just put this on it.
Yeah, that's true.
And we can control these ones because they're in the US or Germany, which I don't know how much people pay attention to news, but some issues in other parts of the world right now, though really all parts of the world, but having a diverse set of locations that you're drawing from is an asset moving forward. So I guess to summarize thoughts on this, story, it is still a rumor. It doesn't mean it's going to go through, and I can't 100% confirm the chance it will, right? But all evidence, right when I saw this even, I was like, oh, that doesn't surprise me. And if it does go through, this just completely kind of throws away the arguments, well, right or wrong, who knows, that Intel should spin off its fabs. This is not, guys.
Yeah.
All right. Let us move on then to the wrap up. So let me see here. We've got multiple. Let's see. I don't know. Let's go through the first story there last, actually. So I saw one interesting thing here where if a game supports any DLSS, you can update it manually by yourself to 2.2. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen some people talking about it on Twitter, too, like in conversations you used in the script last week where people are, putting different versions of DLSS in by they're just swapping out the DLSS file in the game, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which I'm curious how well that works, or if it's buggy at all. I would imagine
some of the games had some big problems, I think, but others, people claimed it worked fine.
Okay.
But yes.
I mean, if you're bored, I guess you can see if games work in DLSS.
Well, the thing is, I don't really have many games with DLSS 1 that I would bother trying because I just haven't even bothered until a game is 2.2 because of how terrible, or 2.0, I should say, or later, because of, I tried 1.0 and anything below 2 I'm really not interested in. But yeah, that's interesting. Additionally here, AMD says 80 system designs are unofficially going to be using the PS5's hardware. So that's kind of interesting that it's like that, not even just the 4700S, but you could start seeing the PlayStation 5 APU show up in various different model types all over the place, which again, I'm also just pointing out, I told you guys the 4700S was on the Xbox. How many of those websites just said they were wrong, that it was the Xbox? After running with 3 articles in a row about it for weeks. Nobody admitted it.
Yep.
All right. There's the right to repair thing going on. I actually haven't followed this. Do you have anything to really say about that? It actually seems like things are kind of going in a pro-consumer way for the most part.
That's a good thing. I'm surprised, and the Woz is cool, I guess. He's always been cool, though, I think. Also
an interesting thing here, PlayStation assets were also found in Netflix code. So I don't know how much you've followed this. I don't think there's many details outside of the fact that they found, let me look here, kind of like graphics for the controller and Ghost of Tsushima in Netflix code after an update. I would say if it was just one of the game's pictures, that might only suggest some movie coming to Netflix, because apparently Sony has some deal to bring their frickin', I don't know why they're making them, but PlayStation movies to Netflix, day on date, kind of similar to like how DC's coming to HBO day and date. But the controller picture's odd, because that to me suggests they may bring PS Now to Netflix.
Yeah, or they're teaming up to
market
or because the only thing I could imagine if they're bringing PS Now to Netflix is if Netflix and PS and PlayStation are in bed together to launch a streaming service together or something for gaming. Because I don't know why Sony would deliver PS Now through Netflix, and why Netflix would also have its own gaming streaming thing. Which, I mean, that other thing, it just says Netflix Gaming. That's clearly something that's being developed by Netflix.
Yeah, I again, there's really very little detail. So this isn't a main story. It's just in the wrap up. But it is interesting to see, xCloud and kind of taking off next to Game Pass. And it would be really interesting if just this asymmetric thing happens where Sony just goes, oh, well, we're partnering with Netflix for our game delivery service.
Yeah.
And it would make sense because Microsoft's like one of those like $1 trillion companies, I believe.
I doubt Netflix is that, but
nope, they're about the same size as Sony. You know,
what is that? Is that like 100 billion?
I think above 200 billion.
Okay.
So, which again, I didn't. So yeah, it would make sense why they would both go, oh, we're kind of getting strong armed here. We should partner up.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know the Netflix's infrastructure, but it might be a good idea to partner with Netflix for streaming. Although I once again, I want to see how low latency Netflix is compared to any other streaming service, because they don't really need to worry about latency when it comes to streaming movies. Again,
though, I could see if that's this hypothetical, not confirmed partnership, make a ton of sense when you consider the deal could simply be, hey, we're done with PS Now. We're just bringing it through Netflix, and Netflix, you'll get extra advertising on every PlayStation console. And then also all these other deals back and forth. It's an interesting development. But again, who knows? Maybe it's much less than that.
Yeah, it has to be noted that this story is entirely from a guy found some PlayStation assets in Netflix's source code.
Yeah.
So it could just be some relic of a non-existent deal too or something.
Yeah, that's true. All right. And then also in the wrap up, I just wanted to throw this in here. The fact that the NUC 11 Extreme is like out with an i9 11900KB Tiger Lake. And I mean, guys, this is a desktopified, shall we say, version of the 8-core Tiger Lake that boosts to 5.3 gigahertz with one core and can boost multiple cores to like 4.9. And I'm putting this next to another story of, and I can't, I haven't looked into confirming any of this yet. I might, I'm going to start asking around, but that the i9 12900K from Alder Lake also boosts to 5 gigahertz. And then all cores to, 1 to 2 core to 5.3, 8 core to 5 gigahertz. It's like, so from where we're sitting, Tiger Lake already hits 5.3 gigahertz. There's rumors coming out that Alder Lake could have all core clocks, depending on your power configuration, to 5 gigahertz. There's evidence here Alder Lake could be a real clock speed beast in addition to that IPC increase.
I think Intel, they've decided they're the clock speed champs, so I suspect that they would want Alder Lake to hit 5 gigahertz regardless. But yeah, my guess is that Alder Lake will be clocked to 5 or higher, maybe not higher than that. Core. Yeah.
And I mean, from where I'm sitting, it's just like, everything else here in these Alder Lake leaks coming out now are basically confirming everything I've said about the configurations of the top i9, i7, and i5, like 8+8, 8+4 for the i7, and then 6+4 for the i5K. But then the non-K i5s are 6+0, so just 6 big cores, no little cores, which is interesting again, I think, but makes sense to me, and I won't get into it again. And that, if they bring over a 10% or 15% IPC increase and then have all core boost to 5 gigahertz, I think this could just firmly be the best gaming processor at the end of this year. But then again, Zen 3D coming with possibly a 15% IPC increase for games. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be interesting. Yeah. And there are rumors now emerging, by the way, and little whispers I've heard of AMD considering going all out with the Zen 3D lineup. Like maybe they will do some sort of architectural enhancement or node shrink at the same time. So this, some of this is why I leak so much stuff too, is it's just like, if I'm told not to leak something in the future, I don't for my sources. But, I want AMD to know that Intel's could be coming with something way better than what they have now. And I want Intel to know that AMD could still beat Raptor Lake even in multi-thread because of how good it's going to be. I don't want any of this frickin' holding back from either company. And that's really just what I continue to hope for. I don't care. I don't own stock in either of these companies. I just want them to go all out.
Yeah.
All right. Let us get to the final reader mail. So Tick Tickler writes in, he says, what cabal of witches does Mark Cerny frequent to get ray tracing better than the Leather Jacket Man, whose $1,200 pitch of it to the world is the basis for the monorail episode of The Simpsons. So I don't know exactly what that is. He's referencing.
Oh, that's a classic episode of the Simpsons.
What happens?
It's been a really long time since I've seen that episode, but
I've probably seen it. I just don't remember.
A company, if I remember correctly, a shady company comes in and builds a monorail in Springfield.
Okay. But you don't remember
it's been a year since I've seen that episode.
But anyways, though, I'm not really sure what to make of your question, but I'm going to interpret it to mean, why does ray tracing work so well on the consoles? And I specifically assume you mean Miles Morales, because I think that's still pretty much quoted as the best looking console ray tracing game. And I would just say, the PS5 has a custom architecture with its own enhancements. And this is continued to be reiterated by every dev I have on the podcast, by the way, guys. And also, though, Insomniac's a really talented dev who's probably just getting more out of it than a lot of devs can when they're programming for a bunch of things, especially when half of the stuff that they've been programming for recently for ray tracing on PC is out of NVIDIA's black box that they have limited access to half the time. However, if you look at Resident Evil 8, the PS5 and Xbox Series X have some ray tracing. The Xbox Series X also runs that a little better than the PS5 did. So no matter how you dice it, both of these consoles have pretty impressive ray tracing, at least for what some people expected, I would argue. And overall, I would just say some devs are really talented at this. And clearly, RDNA 2 is not, putting in quotes, bad at ray tracing. Clearly, RDNA 2 is not bad at ray tracing. It just hasn't been supported yet. That's my answer. There's no black magic. It's just AMD made a good architecture, and devs, haven't fully utilized it yet. You look at Resident Evil 8, it's running about as well as Ampere.
With the PS5 and Xbox Series X being RDNA 2 devices, I suspect that will have some carryover into gaming.
Yeah.
into gaming PCs.
Yeah. Yeah, NVIDIA should ensure that they get another console with a new APU in the next few years, I would think. King Atlas 347 writes in, Dan's shaking his head laughing like he goes, just a quick question. So I've seen multiple videos popping up about a Navi 3X being twice as powerful as Navi 2X lately, especially on Broken Silicon. The way that I've always seen it, though, is that it would be 3 times the power efficiency over the original Navi, rather than another complete doubling of performance over the previous generation. They do call it 3X. Right. That's not wrong. But remember, the Navi 3X thing was years ago, and that was their initial commitment, right? Remember, too, things like when they first talked about Zen 1, they're like 40% IPC increase. Or like at least 40% IPC increase, I think is what they said, over like Bulldozer. I don't know if they compared it to Excavator, I think. But it ended up being, like, if I remember correctly, 54% better. So at the end of the day, they have their initial promises. They were, I'm just saying, they're promising that they would bring something, 50% better than RDNA 2. And I would suggest that I may talk about what they promised, what they thought they can do, and what they're going to end up successfully doing in an upcoming leak. But that it's not incorrect to say that they said 3x RDNA 1. It will be, at least that.
Well, yeah, and you've talked about that before, like on other videos, like tempering expectations that RDNA 3 is going to an out and outright double performance, because if they did it, that would be way more, like we've said on this podcast before, that would be way more impressive than doubling RDNA 1 with RDNA 2 like they did.
Yeah.
So if they do that, I'll be very impressed.
And remember, right, AMD, the reason Zen 3D reveal was so surprising is because AMD themselves didn't know it was working well until like months before that presentation. And then they showed it off. That's why there weren't all these rumors of it coming out before then. And so when they were planning RDNA 3, you have to understand that, like, I think the Navi 3X thing was like, wasn't that like early 2019 or something? I don't know. Or was it I don't remember. Was it early 2020 probably? It was probably early 2020. And you have to understand that they were like, oh, so this is 2 years away. The overall things we can do are now pretty much set in stone, but we don't know which one of these designs will work in manufacturing, mass manufacturing yet. We don't know if we're going to get Vcache working on time. We don't know what the yields will be on 5 nanometer yet. We don't know a lot of things. And so, but we're sure it's going to be 50% better at least, whatever we release. And that if it ends up better than that, those are their earlier projections. If it turns out better, no one's going to complain.
Yeah.
Hello Fractal writes in. He says, "Hey, Tom, I've been curious about something. I think AMD has a firm grasp on the MCM chiplets type of technology right now, and I know NVIDIA is also looking into a multi-chip GPU. So if both AMD and NVIDIA go MCM chiplet for GPUs, do you see a time where RDNA 3 or 4 takes the gaming crown in such a way that NVIDIA couldn't release a TI or Super and call it a win?" So I assume by this question you mean if they both go multi-chip, are you really sure like RDNA 3 will be strong enough that even if NVIDIA goes all out, they won't be able to beat it? That's how I interpret this question.
That, or it's kind of like a market reversal, like where AMD is essentially just releasing, NVIDIA can essentially only release mid-range cards if you're comparing them to AMD. Because that's kind of the way I think that's the kind of the way it would have to go for NVIDIA to not be able to compete against AMD's top end.
Yeah, maybe, which I'm trying to think of what I've heard. Let's say I'm, like I said, working on a couple of leaks. I'm not going to say right now, but I would just say that I'm starting to. Right now, AMD expects to win, and I've said that a million times, so this isn't new. And when I say win, I don't mean win kinda, and then they release a Super and beat AMD. Right now, AMD believes they will win, and the only thing I'm going to say is I am kind of starting to double check, because what I've asked a couple of sources is this though: does Jensen like losing? Does he like being surprised? Does he not have resources? Has he not gotten architecture redesigns out in record time, like with Maxwell? So I'm starting to double check and make sure, because AMD does think they're going to win right now, or at least they did as of a couple weeks ago. So I don't know though. To say that I'm sure NVIDIA can't win, no, I'm not sure of anything with NVIDIA. They're very closed ship. They're very closed lips over there, and Jensen hates losing. So you should never 100% count them out. I think some people are, and that's premature. Melodic Warrior writes in, "Recently, for the fun of it, I did some benchmarking with the 6800 XT. I decided to compare it stock for stock with the RTX 3080 Ti. The settings I chose were 1440p high or ultra with RT turned on." Oh, so you had ray tracing turned on. "The following titles used: Control, Warzone, Fortnite, Cyberpunk. Results were that while the 3080 Ti was 12.5% faster, that it is still a shorter gap than what it used to be. Also, my VRAM usage in Cyberpunk exceeded 14 gigabytes in busy spots. Oh, and with RTX turned on in Warzone with the 6800 XT, I beat the 3080 Ti by a surprising 6% and came within 2% of average FPS and Control. It would beat both the 1% and 0.1% lows." Yeah, I would say some of these would be surprising, except that you had ray tracing turned on, and a lot of these games were built with NVIDIA's ray tracing in mind. So, but to say that it's surprising that AMD won by 6% in some games isn't. There's a lot of people now saying that RDNA 2 is aging better than Ampere, and I would just go back and look at the original reviews and go, I don't know. At review day, the 6800 XT beat the 3090 in multiple games in 4K. It just depends on which games you benchmark.
Yeah, there's always weird flukes like that, too.
Yeah, but I don't even consider it a fluke. Even on average, like the 3091 by what? Like nothing, like a very small percent, like single digits.
Well, I think that's been a big thing. That
we've been talking about.
That we've said a lot is once you're at the enthusiast level, it's like we're talking about 10% performance differences for the most part anyways. So yeah, I guess it's not really a fluke. It's just they're close to each other in performance every once in a while, even though on average the 3090 is stronger. There's going to be games the 6800 XT wins in.
What I would say is if you go to mooreslawsdead.com and look at the performance tiers, there is a reason I put, let me just pull it up to make sure, because it'd be pretty silly if I misquoted myself, but let me just double check it here, as you all can. And yeah, I put the 6800 XT, 6900 XT, 3090, 3080 Ti, and 3080 in the same tier of performance with a red asterisk next to the 3080 because that will run out of RAM in games in 4K, multiple games. So And it really is unsuitable above 4K because of the amount of RAM it has. And as Melodic Warrior points out, there's games already at 3080 Ti's running out of RAM. So yeah, I mean, these cards were always all close to each other, guys. That's really all I can say. And that was a big focus of my 3080 Ti A6000 review, is just like the idea that this is some higher tier is ridiculous. All of these cards are within single-digit percentage performance, roughly speaking, maybe double digit. But then if you overclock both, the RDNA 2 cards overclock far better. So I just say they're all roughly the same performance depending on the type of user you are. And really, the 3080 Ti, as I said in my review, is a 6800 XT with less RAM for double the price that uses more energy. So if that's what you like, cards for double the money with less RAM that use more energy, get a 3080 Ti. I would say all other consumers need not apply. And the idea that this is priced higher than a 6900 XT, let alone a 6800 XT, is absurd. It's absurd. Yeah. I would say it's really a 6800 XT competitor in terms of overall value. Less RAM, more power usage, and the performance really isn't better. I don't know. Anyways, though, Uni writes in, Tom, it's beer time. Not quite yet. We're not done. I'm getting very tired, though. He goes, I've seen a lot of negativity towards Windows 11 recently. Do we feel it's going to be a buggy mess, or will it be the next Windows 7/XP? So I just thought I'd put this in as the final reader mail. It's just kind of a gun up to your head, Dan. Will Windows 11 have a good launch?
I think it will be fine. I don't know what good really means here. Like, I think Windows 11 looks like Windows 10, except they moved some shit around.
Yeah.
And made it more glassy looking. I don't know what else to even really say about Windows 11. I hope it's not a buggy mess, but I don't know what else to really say about it.
I would just say, you made me think of something interesting here. Even all Windows, even the ones people didn't like, were kind of created for a reason. Like Vista was pretty terrible, but it did have a way more modern looking interface, in my opinion, and it did bring some newer features. XP was really looking old by the time Vista came out, I think. And so there was cause to create it. And then if you look at Windows 8, well, it was kind of created for tablets. That's why it was made. And it tried to be more efficient with RAM usage than 7. And then you go to Windows 10 and it fixed the problems of 8 that people had a lot of problems on. 11 doesn't fix anything anyone needed. And this is kind of the first Windows, whether you liked previous distros or not, that I can honestly say I'm not sure what the point is.
It's going to have slightly smaller update sizes, so I guess that's good.
And it's going to force you to get it for like newer DirectX and direct storage features and stuff. Outside of that, is it the next Windows 7 or XP? I think Windows 10 is the new Windows 7 XP. And I kind of don't expect it to be terrible. I just expect it to be like in between, how do I put this? In between what Windows 8.1 was and Windows, kind of like Windows 7 or something. It's not going to be terrible, I don't think, but there's going to be a lot of people that are just like, why'd they move this? Like with Windows 8.
Yeah, I agree. I think it felt like they needed to release a new version of Windows because one hasn't came out for 5 years or something?
Yeah.
6 years? I mean, that seems to be the reasoning for why it came out. It doesn't look, I don't know, I guess that they have the new social media 2021 web interface look that everyone hates, so that's good.
Yeah, I really don't have much to say. There are some things in it that I thought looked good. There are some things in it that I'm like, why'd you move that? And I don't expect it to be great or bad. I just expect it. I don't think people are going to really care about this one, both in a good and a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be upgrading to Windows 11 day one. I don't see a reason to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. All right, damn. That's it. That's the final reader mail. We finished the questions.
I'm just mad because it started pouring down rain again for another goddamn time.
It's been raining a lot in Massachusetts, is my understanding.
I cannot go. The amount of times I need to go outside a day, I cannot go outside without getting wet at least once.
There's a joke there somewhere. but we won't be making it. I just want to thank everyone for listening again. Remember, this is a podcast. You know, if you subscribe on a podcast app to get the weekly downloads, that helps us. Remember, you can listen to that there, typically with less ads. And if you want no ads and for it to come out early, you can support us on Patreon, where you can also ask us questions, get the exclusive patron-only podcast Die Shrink, free loose ends questions, access to the Discord. There's a lot of stuff there. And, you know, again, we have someone coming on from Sony Santa Monica. You know, you will still, the questions will still be open for him when this comes live, even in the public feed. So look for that there. We need your support. But for me, Dan, and Gerard, and apparently for Reese's vet bills. Because, again, you could argue that she's a part of the team at this point. She's definitely in all the ads. She's
arguably the most important member of the team, Tom.
I don't know about that, but
she's definitely the most cute dog-like member of the team.
Yeah, she's definitely cuter than me. If I just acted like a dog, that'd just be really creepy.
Little weird.
It'd be pretty creepy. You don't want to be one of those people. Although now I know someone probably is into. Damn, they call it pup play. I think it's time to stop the podcast. On that note,
we've gone too far.
We're not saying everyone who's into pup play has gone too far, but we are saying that is not in the purview of this podcast. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Telus, GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yacht, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawai, Frederick Lau, James Crassa, Justin Pear, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, The Ninth Dude, Greg Renegar, Josh Law, JBG, Travis Gooding, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lee Booking Kilo, Fatboy Disru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA81, Nathan Mose, Coal Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, Juan Garcia, Sean Vollmer, My Name is Nobody, Judson N, Elethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchik, Ivan 214, John Jameson, Benjamin Cannon, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Jan Router, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Ali Robertson, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Groh, Evan Dingle, Dominique Cox, Stefan, Original Ross, Dick Dickler, Joaquin Hagan, Total Silo, Sol Connor, Michael Costa, Andrew S., Blake, Aaron Keith, Greg S. Acker, Endless Logins, Tom San Filippo, Justice Brennan, Zoot Suit Taylor, Trevor Powers, Stu, Elenia, Nanyan, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Dan Gawanowski, Alex Carrastillo, Dark Rain 2049, Lane Perry, Joseph Kierman, Carlos Valdez, Carnivore Bear, Denovin Russell, Zaber Z. Burrs, Licky, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulam, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Dehuhu, Sarah Light, Anthony Gareffa, Matthew Griffin, Eddie Del Castillo, Joseph Loria, Luis Correa, Deke, Jeezy Raman, Raul Abaneni, Tim Robbins, Shake223, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou, Mark Kelly, Dave McCoy, Valco Malev, Gabe Langner, Rodney Morton Svensson, Michael Deaton, Thomas Summers, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Scott Rev Schneider, Mai Sharona, Y Trui, Roman, William W. Draper, Air Rats, Wakir Khan, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, SS, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Semi Malas, Kevin Chen, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, Arpit Sharma, Meat and Pork, Jimmy NG, Mads Beachhorn, Benjamin Oshley, Z Jits, Shield TV Couteau, Dane P., John Wisink, Sam Venzel, Mark Mitchell, Brucha, Jeremy So, James Anderson, Jesse, Jess Kowiak, Ian Clifford, Tyler Lindley, MJB1, Amiable Sheaf, Mitchell Pell, Gordon Freeman, Garanadin, Aaron, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.